Are you going to arrest me?
My colleague's going to explain what's going to happen next, right?
Am I being arrested?
There's currently hundreds of hours of commentary on the Tommy Robinson arrest on YouTube, but very little in the way of legal analysis. So I thought I'd throw my match head's worth onto this forest fire. First thing I did when I heard about his arrest was to see if any lawyers had spoken about it. This led me to this piece, written by someone called The Secret Barrister, who often loans his opinions out to newspapers, although the only advocacy he seems to engage in is fighting handbag wars on Twitter. The article itself is drenched in left-wing bias, dismissing Robinson and his supporters as knuckle-draggers, racists, and a Klan meeting. Obvious hypocrisy from someone who earns a respectable living from representing the very type of people he clearly despises. All the more reason, I suppose, for his anonymity, lest any of his future clients discover what a resentful snob he really is. But among all this virtue signalling, he scrapes together a reasonable assessment of the law, except for where he allows his reason to be overcome by his hatred for all things Tommy Robinson. To start out, he describes the police arrest for breach of the peace as being without fault. Robinson proactively filming defendants and streaming on Facebook for the edification of his cult is the kind of thing which could, it might be argued, lead to a breach of the peace. Yeah, it might if you argued with a brick wall or some snide barrister who's willing to abandon a few centuries worth of case law just to satisfy his own prejudice. No matter how far you want to reinvent that ancient law, what Robinson did fell far short of breaching the peace, or rather suspicion of breaching the peace, to put it more accurately, because even the police officer that was probably acting on orders from GCHQ couldn't bring himself to properly say what he knew not to be true.
Do you understand what I've just said to you?
No, can you explain it again?
You're under arrest on suspicion following the breach of the peace.
What does that mean?
The arrest itself was unlawful and was misused as a holding charge until the police and the court had time to consider whether or not a contempt of court had taken place. But the secret barrister is right to say it made no difference to the contempt of court charge. This is because, contrary to what Tommy seemed to believe at the time, there was a court order in place forbidding all immediate press coverage of the proceedings, known as a postponement order. It didn't matter how respectfully or reservedly he covered the event, the fact that it was live streaming the defendants going in and out of the court was enough for a judge to find him in contempt of that order. But what about the summary proceedings themselves? Was that lawful? Well, in the case of contempt, a summary trial without a judge, heard by that same judge that may have experienced the contempt, is due process under the Contempt of Court Act. No matter how unjust it seems, it is the law. Not that it matters much because there wasn't a trial because Robinson pled guilty. And had he not, he could have appealed any subsequent conviction. But then there were complaints that Robinson had been denied access to a lawyer, or at least forced to take a prosecution lawyer rather than a defence lawyer. To this, the secret barrister remarked, he was advised and represented by a specialist criminal barrister with over 16 years of experience of cases. As an independent barrister, he prosecutes as well as defends. Most of us do. In other words, Yaxley Lennon had a top-notch defence barrister fighting his corner. Well, if the secret barrister is the measure of independence and impartiality of defence lawyers in the criminal justice system, then Tommy Robinson got a worse deal than people thought. Those that are opposed to Robinson believed he got justice. He didn't. He got the law. Both barrels of it. I understand that Robinson was still within the boundaries of an earlier suspended sentence when he committed this further contempt, but was a 13-month sentence justice seen to be done? Incarcerating him is a much more severe penalty than if it had just been a normal journalist that had broken the same law, because Robinson is a human bullseye in prison, where many of those he's actively demonstrated against are being held. How is it that a judge in one case can use his discretion to suspend the sentence of a Muslim male who raped a 13-year-old girl because sending him to jail might cause him more damage than good? But Tommy Robinson is not worthy of the same consideration, and to my knowledge, he hasn't raped anyone. But he is at significantly greater risk of harm in jail than most rapists. It's this inconsistent approach to justice that has got so many people riled. I do reserve some criticism for Robinson, however, because he certainly had a hand in his own downfall. I would have thought his freedom was worth much more than the need to cover this one trial. If not, couldn't he have at least mitigated the risk he was taking by seeking instructions from a solicitor as to what or would not constitute contempt? He has used lawyers with some success in the past. In fact, there's many instances in his live stream where he seems uncertain himself as to whether or not what he's doing could be in contempt, and he's also unsure of where the boundary of the court begins. At certain points, he takes the thoroughly reckless step of asking police officers for advice.
Officer, are these stairs so if You're not allowed to go on those stairs, am I? Whilst recording.
As long as you're respectful.
This isn't the property of the court, though, is it? No, it's this. Okay, so I'll stay off them.
You'd have thought by now Robinson would have learned to disregard the police for the lying state Autobots that they really are. However, what puzzles me is if the police and the judge were so concerned about Robinson's live streaming interfering with the course of justice, then why did they allow it to continue for over an hour before they did anything about it? After all, he was live streaming in full view of police officers and court officials right on the courthouse steps. At one point, he comments on the judge looking down at him from his chambers. I mean, it should have been plainly obvious from the first few minutes of his streaming that Robinson was in contempt of court, so why the delay? The judge certainly considered the length of the live stream as an aggravating factor, so, to paranoid minds, it could almost seem as if they wanted Robinson to further the contempt, so they could further the sentence. The vagaries of the law aside, smug commentators like the secret barrister, who hide behind the cowardice of anonymity, can consider it a fait accompli, and ridicule Robinson, his legion of followers and their beliefs, as nothing more than the crude ideals of football thugs and racists. But it doesn't take a thug to know that these men on trial are child-raping animals, and that shifting the focus away from the perpetrators and onto those that rightly hate them will in no way diminish the culpability of these poisonous invaders and their left-wing enablers. And it's a sad fact that the very justice that failed the children that were raped by these savages never seems to fail the elite who would use that same justice to make an example of anyone who deviates from the state narrative. Sending Robinson to prison is a virtual death sentence for the man. But then maybe that's just what the establishment wants, to sneak in the death penalty through the back door and rid themselves of him once and for all. If you're in need of any legal help, then please visit the Crime Bodge website. There you'll find, among all the articles, downloads and ebooks, the Get Help service. This is a paid-for service where you can get one-to-one help on a wide range of police-related issues, such as how to deal with harassment warnings, how to get the police to investigate a crime, what to do if you're offered an interview under caution, how to challenge cautions, how to hold the police to account, and how to sue them. A link to that service is provided in the description, as well as a link to the full range of ebooks available from the site.